calm, almost ordinary day inside the Galactic Empire's central communication hub. The officers inside the large, circular control room believed they had seen everything the universe could offer new species. Strange signals, lost colonies, and wandering ships with outdated technology. Nothing surprised them anymore. At least, that was what they thought. A junior officer noticed a small, slow-moving dot on the edge of their border space. It looked like just another unknown vessel passing through. Normally, such things were routine. Scan it, tag it, ignore it. But something about the reading felt off. The ship moved with a steady, confident pace, as if it knew exactly where it was going. It didn't try to hide, didn't accelerate, and didn't change direction when scans touched it. It simply drifted forward, as if it didn't care who was watching. The officer called a supervisor over, expecting to be told he was overthinking again. But instead of dismissing him, the supervisor frowned at the display. The ship was small, far too small to be considered a military craft. It resembled the size of a civilian transport vessel, maybe the type used for slow cargo hauls or long-distance scientific trips. But the readings around it didn't match anything in the Empire's database. The energy field around the ship was stable yet unusual, almost like it was quietly absorbing the scanning waves instead of reflecting them. The supervisor ordered a closer inspection. Soon, a few other officers gathered around, whispering quietly. They argued about whether this was a malfunction in the system. One suggested updating the sensor grid. Another argued the ship might be covered in some type of debris that confused the scan. But each theory collapsed when the ship adjusted its angle slightly, giving the Empire's scanners a clean front-facing view. The readings repeated strange, unknown, nothing like anything they'd recorded before. When the central commander arrived to check, he took one look at the display and decided the situation was not a threat. His reasoning was simple. The ship was tiny, slow, and carried no heavy weapon signature. If it belonged to humans and the markings suggested it did, then it was likely just another one of their odd exploration vessels. Humans had a reputation for experimenting with strange designs, often using creative but highly inefficient technology. The Empire didn't fear them. They mostly found them unpredictable and somewhat eccentric. Still, protocol demanded a formal response. So the commander contacted a nearby patrol fleet made up of lightly armed but fast-moving ships. He ordered them to intercept the unknown vessel, guide it out of restricted space, and gather a bit more data if possible. Nothing seemed dangerous. They had done the same thing hundreds of times. The patrol fleet approached the human ship with confidence. Their communicators were open, and their voice messages carried polite but firm instructions. They expected the human ship to respond immediately. But the small craft said nothing. It did not change course, did not alter speed, and did not acknowledge their presence in any visible way. The patrol leader tried again, speaking louder, clearer. Still nothing. It was unusual, but not alarming. Some ships had older systems or damaged communicators. So the fleet decided to circle around the vessel, to scan it from all angles. Yet the moment they began their maneuver, something unexpected happened. Their engines flickered, dimmed for a second, then returned to normal. A few officers in the patrol fleet brushed it off as a power balancing issue. But when the lights dimmed again, this time for a bit longer, they realized something was happening. As the fleet continued scanning, more strange effects began. The targeting systems flickered, momentarily switching off. The shields fluctuated like a heartbeat, steady one moment, uncertain the next. The crew members grew uneasy. Their ships were in perfect condition before leaving the station. There was no reason for these failures. None of them blamed the human ship at first. It showed no signs of aggression, didn't power up weapons, and didn't make any defensive maneuvers. It simply drifted as calmly as before, like a small boat floating on a still lake. But then, one by one, each patrol ship experienced a sudden loss of engine power. Not total shutdown, just a sharp drop that forced them to stabilize their positions manually. The officers scrambled to keep their ships steady. The patrol leader shouted orders, demanding a full system analysis. Not all systems reported the same message. No, external attack detected. This confused them even more. If there was no attack, then what was interfering with their technology? The human ship, meanwhile, still had not reacted. No signals, no lights, no changes. It seemed unaware or unconcerned that dozens of Empire ships surrounded it. Eventually, the patrol leader made the decision to retreat. They were too close to the ship, and the effect seemed to worsen the nearer they got. So they pulled back to a safer distance. As they moved away, their systems gradually returned to normal. Engines steadied. Shields stabilized. Targeting systems stopped flickering. It was as if the interference had a radius, and once they were outside it, they were free. The patrol officers returned to base embarrassed, shaken, and unsure of how to explain what happened without sounding incompetent. But the Empire's senior council demanded a report. So they gathered all the data, shaky camera footage, sensor readings, and eyewitness accounts. When the footage played on the council chamber's main screen, silence filled the room. There was the small human ship, drifting peacefully. No weapons fired. No sudden movements. Nothing threatening. But around it, the Empire patrol ships flickered like candles about to go out. Lights dimmed. Engines struggled. Equipment protested. The human ship, on the other hand, looked so calm that it seemed unreal, like it wasn't even trying. Council members exchanged confused glances. Some whispered that humans must have discovered a new kind of defensive technology. Others argued the ship might be using a natural phenomenon they didn't understand. A few suggested humans had finally reached the rumored technological plateau that only rare species ever achieved. But no one could agree on anything. One thing was certain. None of them had ever seen a ship disable an entire patrol fleet without firing a single shot, without sending a warning, without even acknowledging their presence. Some council members tried to calm the room by saying the patrol fleet simply got too close and triggered a defensive field by accident. But others refused to accept that explanation. They pointed out that the human ship had not shown any visible defensive structure, nor did it change its energy output even once. Fear began to spread quietly, not wild panic, but the kind that settles deep and slowly grows. And then came the small but important detail discovered by one of the analysts. The ship had a civilian registration, not military, not research, not even experimental testing, just a standard civilian, long-range vessel. That detail alone shook the room more than anything else. If a civilian ship could cause this kind of disruption, then what could a human military ship do? The council refused to escalate the issue yet. They tried to dismiss it as a misunderstanding, a malfunction, or a rare technological side effect. But deep inside, each council member felt something unsettling, something they didn't want to say. Aloud, the Empire was dealing with something they didn't fully understand. The officers who reviewed the footage privately admitted they felt something else, too, an odd sense of humility. Humans had been underestimated for a long time. People joked about their unpredictable inventions, their chaotic thinking, their strange curiosity. But what they saw today was different. It wasn't something random. It wasn't clumsy or experimental. It felt intentional, controlled, powerful in a quiet way. That single encounter became the start of a whisper inside the Empire's halls. A whisper that said humans were not the same species they once knew. A whisper that warned this might be the beginning of something far bigger. The human ship continued drifting, unaware of the attention it had generated. It would be many days before the Empire understood how much that small, silent vessel would change their perception of humanity. And it would be even longer before they realized something far more surprising. This ship was nothing compared to what was coming later. Few hours after the patrol fleet returned, the atmosphere inside the Empire's central headquarters had changed completely. What started as a small, unimportant encounter had turned into a topic no one could ignore. Officers walked faster, whispers spread through the corridors, and everyone who saw the footage of the human ship couldn't stop thinking about what they had witnessed. Inside a private meeting chamber, high-ranking officials gathered around a long oval table. The lights were dim, the air tense. The doors were sealed from outside interference. No one wanted this discussion to leak until they understood what was happening. The Empire took pride in projecting strength, stability, and control. But this situation, it threatened all three at once. The council leader played the patrol footage again. The silent human ship drifted across the screen, calm and harmless looking. The patrol fleet circled it, engines flickering like candles in a storm. The officers watched every second of the recording, hoping to catch a clue they had previously missed. But nothing changed. The human ship did nothing. No message, no adjustment, no defense maneuvers, just quiet, steady movement. One official leaned forward, rubbing his forehead. He said it didn't make sense. If humans had developed something that could interfere with Imperial systems, they would have used it in past conflicts. Another argued that humans were unpredictable and often kept secrets for decades. A third tried to calm the room by suggesting it was simply a unique energy field the Empire didn't understand yet, but each explanation felt weak. As they continued debating, an intelligence officer entered the chamber with fresh data. He placed a small device on the table, and the screen lit up with a detailed profile of the human vessel. The room leaned forward. Everyone wanted answers. The officer explained that the ship had no heavy weapon signature, no large engine core, and no military-grade armor layering. In fact, the ship was so lightly built that it would crumble under heavy gravitational pressure. It didn't make sense. A vessel with such a simple exterior shouldn't be able to disrupt a patrol fleet systems. Then the officer showed the registration details. The ship belonged to a civilian transport company, nothing special, nothing secretive, nothing hidden. This caused a wave of discomfort around the table. If the ship carried no special tech, then how did it disable their system so easily? The council leader didn't believe it either. He pressed the officer for more details, but all he could say was that the ship's internal energy readings were stable, controlled, and strangely efficient. But the sensors couldn't identify the source. It was like looking at a bright light through frosted glass, visible, but not clear. The council fell silent. They had relied on technology for centuries to identify threats instantly. And now, suddenly, their systems couldn't read a simple human ship correctly. Finally, one of the elder council members spoke. His voice trembled slightly, not out of fear, but out of realization. He said the Empire had grown too comfortable, assuming humans were behind them in development. They had spent decades ignoring signals that humans were, experimenting with new energy systems and long-distance travel methods. Now, he said, they were facing the consequence of their arrogance. His words made the others shift uncomfortably in their seats. No one liked being reminded that the Empire wasn't perfect. As the discussion continued, outside the chamber, rumors were spreading faster than the officials realized. Officers who had seen bits of the footage whispered in hallways. Technicians who examined the patrol ships noticed faint traces of interference patterns. Engineers speculated privately about how humans could produce such stable energy output. Some even wondered if humans had discovered an entirely new energy category, something beyond plasma, beyond antimatter, something unrecorded. Even the public began catching hints. Messages leaked in tiny fragments across unofficial channels. People started talking. Some believed humans had stumbled upon an experimental device. Others thought the Empire was hiding something much larger. But no one knew the truth, because the Council had barely grasped it themselves. The patrol officers who returned from the encounter sat inside a small briefing room, waiting to be questioned again. They felt embarrassed, but also deeply confused. None of them had ever seen their ships behave so strangely. Some even admitted they felt a strange sensation while near the human vessel. Not fear, not pressure, just a quiet awareness. Like standing close to something powerful that simply chose not to show its strength. The officer leading the patrol confessed something that caught the attention of the investigators. He said that during the encounter, he had a strange feeling that the human ship could have shut down their systems completely if it wanted to. But instead, it only disrupted them lightly, almost gently, like someone tapping a shoulder instead of pushing hard. That idea unsettled the investigators. If the ship was capable of fully disabling them, but didn't, then it was making a choice. A calm, deliberate choice. That meant intent. And intent meant intelligence and control beyond what they expected. The Council received this report quietly. They didn't want to imagine humans having that level of control. If this was civilian technology, then human military technology must be something unimaginable. The Council had always considered humans clever but limited, creative but scattered. But this new evidence suggested something else, something organized, disciplined, and advanced. The Council leader proposed a full military preparation. He believed humans were testing the Empire's borders, checking their response, evaluating their systems. But others argued strongly against escalating the situation. They feared provoking humans might lead to something the Empire wasn't ready for. A long debate followed. Voices rose, tones sharpened, and frustration grew around the room. The Empire was divided. Half wanted to show strength. Half wanted to avoid conflict until they understood what they were dealing with. Meanwhile, a new concern surfaced. What if this wasn't a test? What if the humans didn't even know their ship was affecting Imperial systems? If that was true, then humans weren't showing power. They were simply operating at a level where their everyday technology accidentally disrupted advanced military ships. Realization struck the Council like cold wind. If human, civilian technology could cause this much interference without trying, what could happen if humans intentionally activated something meant for defense? The meeting continued for hours, but no final decision was reached. The Empire was too shaken to act boldly, yet too proud to admit it aloud. Eventually, they decided on a cautious approach. They sent a message to nearby fleets, ordering them to avoid engaging the human vessel unless absolutely necessary. They quietly increased internal defenses. And most importantly, they placed all recorded data on the human ship under high security. Only a handful of people in the entire Empire knew the full story. But despite all the secrecy, one truth was becoming clearer by the minute. The Empire was not dealing with the humans they once knew. These were not the explorers who used awkward ships and unpredictable navigation. These were not the diplomats who tried too hard to impress other species. This was something new, stronger, smarter, quiet, confident. And the most unsettling part was this. No one had seen a single human soldier, yet no warship, no fleet, no defensive formation, just one small civilian vessel drifting peacefully through space. If this was the beginning, what would the true human presence look like when it finally appeared? Several days after the Council's private meeting ended, the Empire had tried its best to keep the incident quiet, but strange things have a way of traveling through whispers, and whispers travel faster than any ship. Officers who weren't supposed to talk shared fragments of what they knew. Technicians repeated unusual readings to their colleagues. A small rumor grew into a wide conversation until almost everyone in the upper levels of the empire knew something unusual had happened at the border. The public still didn't know anything. But inside the military, people felt a quiet tension they couldn't explain. They called it the silent worry, a feeling that something big was coming. The empire's pride was one of its greatest weaknesses. They were used to being the strongest force in the region. They had spent generations building their fleets, expanding their borders, and reminding the galaxy that they were the ones who set the rules. Losing even a little control bothered them deeply. But having their elite patrol fleet disrupted by a small, silent human ship, that was something no one could accept. So the council made a decision they hoped would restore confidence. They ordered one of their elite fleets much larger, faster, and better equipped than the small patrol to intercept the next human vessel that entered Empire space. To them, this was supposed to be simple, a show of strength, a reminder that the Empire was still the Empire. The elite fleet prepared quickly. Engineers checked every system twice. Pilots trained in simulation rooms, practicing coordinated maneuvers. Officers stood straight, trying to hide their nerves behind strict discipline. Even the smallest sign of fear was taken as a personal weakness, so everyone tried to look confident. But deep inside, many remembered the footage they had seen. The silent human ship drifting peacefully, while the Empire's own systems flickered out of control. That image stayed in their minds like a shadow they couldn't shake off. Before the fleet departed, the commander addressed his officers. He told them their mission was simple: contact the human vessel, guide it out of restricted space, and if needed, demonstrate the Empire's defensive capability. He emphasized that they were not to provoke a conflict. The goal was not to attack, just to observe and understand. But behind his words was something else. Everyone could feel it: pressure. The Empire needed a win, even a small one. The elite fleet set off, leaving the main base with a glowing trail of energy behind them. They moved with smooth, powerful motion, staying in tight formation. It was a beautiful sight, hundreds of ships moving together like one body. The fleet had been built to inspire confidence, both in allies and in themselves. After several hours of travel, the fleet approached the border region. The area was usually quiet, empty, nothing special. But today, everyone felt a strange anticipation. They scanned the space ahead of them carefully, looking for any unusual readings. At first, nothing appeared. The region was clear, silent, dark dot, but then, in the middle of the emptiness, a single dot appeared on their long-range scanners. Small, faint, slow. The officers looked at the reading and felt a familiar unease. The signature matched the same type of human vessel that had caused trouble days ago. The commander immediately ordered the fleet into standard intercept formation. The ships spread slightly, maintaining perfect alignment. Their lights dimmed to operational mode, and their engines shifted to a quiet, controlled tone. Every officer was focused. No one wanted to repeat the embarrassment of the last team. As the fleet approached the human vessel, they opened communication channels and sent out a polite message. The message traveled through space, clear and formal, requesting identification and stating that the ship was in restricted territory. They expected a response, but just like before, nothing came, not a single sound, not even a flicker of acknowledgement. Some officers exchanged glances. Others looked at their screens, double-checking their equipment. But the communication systems were working perfectly. The silence wasn't a technical error. It was intentional. Or worse, effortless. The commander spoke again, sending a second message. This time, he tried using a different frequency, hoping perhaps the vessel was tuned differently. But again, no answer. The silence felt heavier this time, more deliberate. The fleet moved closer. And then, everything changed. At first, The officers thought their screens glitched. The numbers flickered for half a second, then stabilized. A few seconds later, it happened again, just a flicker, nothing more. But those who had seen the previous incident recognized the pattern immediately. It was the same kind of flicker the patrol fleet experienced before their systems weakened. The commander ordered all ships to stay alert, but the human vessel still didn't move. It didn't adjust its direction or speed. It drifted so calmly that it almost looked asleep. Then came the moment no one expected. A communication signal finally appeared from the human vessel. For a moment, the officers held their breath. They expected a warning, maybe an apology. But what they heard made the entire fleet freeze. A calm, steady voice simply said, "Stand down. This is not the Army." The message wasn't aggressive. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even emotional. It sounded like someone stating a simple fact. And somehow, that made it far more unsettling. The fleet commander stared at the message replaying on his screen. He didn't understand. What did they mean? If this wasn't the human army, then who were they? What kind of ship was this? Before he could respond, the fleet's targeting systems flickered again. A moment later, their shield indicators dimmed. The officers scrambled to stabilize them, but the systems didn't respond. Not fully. It was as if something was quietly holding the ships in place, gently pushing back whenever they tried to regain control. The commander ordered a status check. The reports came in fast. Targeting, unstable. Shields, unreliable. Engines, fluctuating. Sensors, partially offline. But the most surprising detail was this: none of the ships were in danger. Nothing was overheating. Nothing was breaking. It felt more like someone was placing a hand on their systems and calmly saying, "Stay still." The human ship still drifted without moving an inch. The officers were confused. Some were frustrated. A few felt a strange respect, though none said it aloud. There was something deeply controlled, incredibly controlled, about the way the human vessel worked. It didn't lash out. It didn't threaten. It didn't defend. It simply existed in a way that gently overpowered everything around it. The commander realized there was no point in continuing the standoff. They couldn't approach the ship without losing control, and the human vessel clearly had no intention of causing harm. The message it had sent still repeated in his mind: "This is not the Army." If a simple civilian vessel could hold back an elite Imperial fleet, then the Empire might not be the strongest force here. The commander ordered the fleet to retreat to a safe distance. Once they moved back, their systems stabilized again, just like before. Lights brightened. Engines regained strength. Shields returned to normal. The moment their systems recovered, the human vessel sent one final short message: "Peace is preferable." Then the ship continued drifting. As if nothing had happened, the commander recorded everything and returned to base with a heavy heart. He knew the Empire would not be pleased, but he also knew they needed to understand the truth. This wasn't a failure of the fleet. It wasn't weakness of the Empire. It was a sign, a quiet warning, a soft reminder that the galaxy was changing, and humans were not the same species they had once underestimated. When the commander submitted his report, the council chamber fell silent. No one argued this time. No one tried to explain away the incident. They all understood the message clearly. If this wasn't the human army, if this was just another civilian craft, then humanity's true strength had not even stepped forward yet, and the Empire, for the first time in a long time, felt small. The aftermath of the elite fleet's encounter. Back inside the Empire's council chambers, the mood was tense and uneasy. The officers and advisors who had reviewed the reports struggled to understand what had happened. They could not deny it. An entire fleet had been held back without a single shot fired by what appeared to be a simple human vessel. That alone was enough to challenge everything the Empire thought it knew about humans. For days, the council debated. Some argued the humans were bluffing, that this was a one-time occurrence caused by a rare anomaly. Others quietly whispered that the humans had reached a level of technology and control beyond anything the Empire had recorded. The tension was quiet but sharp, a knife edge of uncertainty slicing through the room. It was not just about a ship anymore. It was about what humanity represented. It was about what humans were capable of, and the council feared admitting that they did not know the answer. Meanwhile, a small delegation was sent to monitor the human ship from a distance. They approached slowly, careful not to provoke any interference. As they observed, they noticed something unusual. The human crew worked calmly, with a level of precision that was almost impossible to match. Every movement, every adjustment, seemed deliberate and exact. It was the kind of discipline that could only come from years of experience, careful training, and incredible coordination. Yet they did not display aggression, nor did they attempt to show force. They simply existed, confident and undisturbed. When the council received these observations, they realized the truth slowly, painfully, and in parts. If a civilian ship could behave like this, then a fully equipped human military fleet would be something unimaginable. The implications sent a shiver down every spine in the room. They had assumed that humans were clever but limited. Now they faced the possibility that humans had quietly evolved into a force beyond their understanding, one that had been underestimated for generations. The Empire's intelligence officers began piecing together historical data. They reviewed old reports of human ships, minor skirmishes, trade conflicts, and exploration missions. Patterns emerged, patterns that suggested humans were always careful about how and when they revealed their full capabilities. Every encounter had been carefully measured, every technology deployment subtly tested. The realization sank in. Humans were not reckless. They were patient, strategic, and deliberate. At the same time, whispers began to spread among the lower ranks of the Empire's forces. Technicians, navigators, and junior officers spoke in hushed tones about the power of human ships. Even those far removed from command felt the weight of what was unfolding. Rumors grew into stories, and stories became warnings passed quietly from ship to ship. "Be careful if a human vessel is near," one officer would say. "You don't know what it can do," another replied. And though no one had seen a single human warship yet, the fear was growing steadily. The council realized that they needed to act quickly, not with aggression, but with understanding. They decided to invite human representatives to a diplomatic station on the border, a neutral place where discussions could take place without risk. The goal was to learn more about humans, to understand their intentions, and perhaps to negotiate rules that would prevent misunderstandings. But even as the decision was made, everyone in the room knew it was not just diplomacy. They were seeking reassurance. When the humans arrived at the station, the atmosphere shifted. The representatives were calm, quiet, and unassuming, but every action, every gesture suggested confidence. They did not display pride, nor did they make threats. They simply acted as though they were in control of their own destiny and saw no reason to fear the Empire. For the council, this created an unsettling contrast. Here were humans, far less equipped in appearance, yet radiating a sense of authority and calm that no Imperial could fake. The first meetings were polite but formal. Questions were asked about technology, energy systems, and fleet operations. The humans answered clearly, without hesitation, but never revealed secrets they didn't intend to share. Even as they spoke about civilian projects, there was an unspoken assurance that they could achieve far more than they described. The council members noticed the subtle ways humans controlled information, shared knowledge strategically, and maintained confidence without arrogance. It was a methodical, careful approach that made every council member pay attention as the discussions continued. One intelligence officer quietly analyzed the patterns of human communication, observing their choice of words, pauses, and emphasis. Every answer, no matter how simple, seemed designed to convey control and purpose. It became clear that the humans had thought about every possibility, every question, and every reaction. They were prepared, measured, and deliberate. And yet, even with all this preparation, they were not aggressive. That was the most confusing part of all. Their strength was evident, but they showed restraint. That restraint was unlike anything the Empire had experienced from a species with such capabilities. By the third day, the Council began to understand a critical truth. The human ship that had disrupted the patrol fleet and the ship that had silenced the elite fleet were only a fraction of what humans could bring to bear if they chose to. These ships were not warships, yet they had power enough to teach the Empire humility. And that realization led to another. The real human military, the true army, had not even appeared yet. What they had seen so far was the tip of the iceberg. What humans could do if they fully deployed their capabilities was still unknown. The council chamber grew quiet. Officials shifted uneasily in their seats. Some tried to make jokes to break the tension, but no one laughed. They all understood the gravity of the situation. The Empire had believed that strength was always obvious, that power had to be displayed in fleets, weapons, and fleets of fleets. Humans had shown that power could be subtle, silent, and yet unmistakably dominant. That was a lesson they had not anticipated. Even as the council debated what to do next, the humans remained calm. They did not demand concessions. They did not issue threats. They did not ask for praise. They simply stated facts, offered assurances, and conducted themselves with quiet authority. It was this calm, controlled presence that unsettled the Empire the most. They had seen force before. They had seen aggression. But this deliberate, measured confidence without aggression was something new. Reports continued to arrive from other sectors. Observers noted the effects of human ships on communications, energy grids, and even small environmental controls. Nothing was destructive. Nothing was aggressive. Yet the influence was undeniable. Humans seemed to move in harmony with the environment, adjusting to conditions, controlling effects, and maintaining stability. The observers began calling it the invisible hand of human control. It was a quiet influence, but it was there, undeniable and precise. As the council began to realize these truths, the humans left the diplomatic station without incident. They returned to their ships calmly, as if nothing had happened. There were no celebrations, no displays of power, no threats. They simply departed, leaving the council to reflect on what had occurred. For the first time, many council members felt a deep, uncomfortable respect for a species they had once underestimated. And that respect was mixed with fear of recognition that the humans had. Abilities far beyond what anyone in the Empire had expected. The council understood now that everything they had assumed about humans was incomplete, even naive. Humans were not reckless explorers. They were not limited in technology or strategy. They were patient, controlled, and deliberate. And they had made a choice to show only what was necessary. That choice alone told the council something even more important. If humans could operate with such control and power while appearing so calm and unthreatening, then their true capabilities must be unimaginable. In private, the senior officers of the Empire whispered about what they had learned. They did not speak openly of fear, but their words carried weight. They discussed strategies, preparation, and caution. They realized that future encounters with humans could not be approached in the same way as encounters with other species. Humans required respect, understanding, and careful observation. To act hastily could be catastrophic. To underestimate them again could be fatal. And in the quiet moments, when the council chambers were empty and the lights dimmed, many officers thought about the final words of the human envoy. The real army has not even appeared yet. Those words echoed in their minds like a warning, a reminder, and a promise all at once. The Empire knew that they had glimpsed only a small part of what humans could do. And that realization changed everything. Every strategy, every assumption, every sense of superiority had to be reconsidered. Because the humans had shown that they were not just clever, they were prepared, disciplined, and in full control of their future. The Empire had been shocked. And they understood, perhaps for the first time, that humans were not a species to be taken lightly. Quiet, tense day inside the Empire's main command center. The reports from the border had spread slowly, but by now, almost everyone at high levels understood the truth. Humans were not ordinary. What the Empire had seen, the calm, controlled civilian vessels, the subtle influence on fleets, was only a hint of what they could do. The phrase whispered quietly in every hall, in every office, and in every fleet meeting was the same. The real army has not even appeared yet. For weeks, the council debated their next steps. They could not ignore humans anymore. They could not act as if everything was normal. And yet, they hesitated. How do you deal with a species that is patient, precise, and far stronger than expected, when you have no idea of the full scope of their power? Every possible action now carried risk. Every decision could either lead to peace or disaster. That tension made even the most confident officers uneasy. Meanwhile, humans had returned to their own territory, moving with the same calm and methodical approach they had shown before. There were no celebrations, no broadcasts, no demonstrations. They acted as if everything was ordinary, as if nothing had happened at the border. And perhaps that was part of their strength. They did not seek recognition or fear. They simply existed, quietly preparing for whatever the future might bring. Back at the Empire's council chamber, intelligence officers presented new analyses. They compared past human encounters, small skirmishes, and exploration missions. They noticed a pattern. Humans always revealed only what was necessary. They never exposed their full capability. Every action, every vessel, every answer was calculated. The Empire had never faced a species that combined creativity, patience, and discipline in such a balanced way. One officer finally spoke up. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant, but it carried a weight that made everyone pause. He said that what they had seen so far, the civilian ships, the subtle interference, the calm demeanor, was only a small fraction of human potential. The real human military, if deployed, could probably handle multiple fleets without difficulty. This statement, which might have sounded like speculation in any other context, felt real and urgent. The council grew silent, listening closely to each word. The Emperor, who had remained quiet through most of the meetings, finally addressed the room. He did not speak with anger or pride. He did not threaten or command. He simply asked, "What do we know for certain?" The room paused. No one could give a simple answer. They knew humans were powerful, careful, and intelligent, but they did not know the extent. They had seen only the surface, and even that had shaken their assumptions. As discussions continued, humans sent another delegation to the Empire's border station. This time, the approach was calm, deliberate, and formal. They did not arrive with a fleet or weapons. They came as diplomats, speaking clearly and respectfully. They asked for meetings, offered explanations, and shared knowledge in ways that were precise but never revealing. Every gesture, every word, reflected confidence and a sense of control. When the Empire's officials met them, they felt a mix of awe and fear. The humans did not boast. They did not threaten. They simply stated facts, offered guidance, and reminded the council that conflict was unnecessary. Their calm, Quiet confidence was more powerful than any weapon the Empire had deployed. For a moment, the Council felt humbled. For a species that had been underestimated, humans carried an authority that was undeniable. In private, intelligence officers analyzed every detail of the visit. They noted how humans interacted with technology, how they moved through the station, how they communicated with each other. Everything was measured. Nothing was wasted. Even in casual conversation, there was a sense of foresight. Humans seemed to plan multiple steps ahead without showing impatience or haste. The officers realized that patience was part of human strength. They did not need to prove themselves in every encounter. They simply acted with careful timing. Meanwhile, rumors and whispers spread among lower-ranking officers and crews. Stories about the human ship that disrupted fleets traveled fast. Observers spoke in quiet tones about how nothing seemed to harm humans, yet their presence affected entire fleets. Some said it was a new kind of energy, some called it advanced technology, and some simply admitted that humans were beyond understanding. These quiet conversations built a sense of respect and fear that rippled through every sector of the Empire. Back in the council chambers, a younger officer spoke bravely. He said, "If humans are capable of this, then our assumptions are wrong. We cannot continue as if they are just another species." His words were bold, but they resonated. The council had spent decades relying on old data, assuming the Empire's superiority. But humans had proven that assumptions were dangerous. They had shown that power could be subtle, strategic, and deliberate, and that appearances could be deceiving. The Emperor nodded slowly. He asked the council to prepare for a new approach, one that balanced caution with respect. He emphasized that humans had not acted aggressively. They had offered peace. And that peace, combined with their undisputed capability, meant the Empire needed to think differently. Traditional strategies of dominance and intimidation would not work. The humans had set the rules without even raising a hand. In the following days, the humans returned to their own space quietly. They moved with purpose, but without showing force. Their movements were deliberate, controlled, and predictable, yet somehow inspiring awe. Every action seemed calculated to demonstrate that they were aware of their strength, but also willing to act responsibly. The Empire observed, studied, and recorded everything, but still, the full scale of human potential remained a mystery. Within the Empire, the phrase repeated quietly in every office, every ship, every meeting, "The real army has not even appeared yet." It became both a warning and a guiding principle. Officers trained differently, strategists revised plans, and diplomats reconsidered assumptions. Every decision now carried the understanding that humans were patient, intelligent, and far stronger than previously thought. As time passed, humans continued their calm approach. They did not threaten the Empire, but they did not hide their presence either. Their ships, their technology, and their diplomacy all reflected control, precision, and awareness. Every encounter, every observation, reminded the Empire that humans were not reckless explorers or naive diplomats. They were a species that combined patience, intelligence, and capability in ways that were difficult to measure. The council slowly came to a conclusion. Humans were not a species to fear recklessly, but they were not a species to underestimate. Respect was necessary, observation was crucial, and patience was essential. The humans had proven that true strength did not always appear as firepower or aggressive action. It could be quiet, subtle, and controlled. Finally, the human envoy left the border station with a simple message: peace is preferable. Conflict is unnecessary. The real army has not even appeared yet. Those words echoed in the minds of everyone who heard them. They were not a threat, but they carried a quiet authority that demanded attention. The Empire understood something important that day. Humans had power, patience, and control beyond what they had imagined. They had not sought dominance, but they had shown capability. They had not threatened, but they had commanded respect. And perhaps most importantly, they had revealed just enough to ensure the Empire reconsidered every assumption it had ever made about them. From that moment on, humans were no longer just another species to the Empire. They were a force that required understanding, respect, and careful attention. The Empire knew that the next encounter, whenever it might happen, would be different. And they also knew that when the real human army finally appeared, it would change everything. The story of that quiet, controlled encounter spread through every sector of the Empire. Officers, strategists, and citizens alike whispered about it. The lesson was clear. Humans were patient, deliberate, and powerful beyond understanding. And the Empire would never underestimate them again. Humans had not raised weapons, had not demanded submission, and had not issued threats. Yet in one simple message, they had shifted the balance of perception across an entire galaxy. They had reminded everyone that power could exist quietly, patiently, and with precision. The Empire was left to wonder and to prepare for what was still unseen. In the end, the Council understood what had happened. This was not a threat, but a demonstration of wisdom. Humans had shown what they could do, what they might do, and what they could control. And the most chilling, humbling realization was this: none of the full potential had been revealed yet. The real army had truly not appeared. And when it did, the galaxy would understand. The Empire had been shocked, humbled, and reminded of the limits of its knowledge. They had faced humans, not in war, not in conflict, but in quiet strength, controlled presence, and deliberate restraint. And from that day forward, the humans were no longer just explorers or traders. They were a species that commanded respect without a single act of aggression. And that simple truth would echo across the galaxy for generations to come.